My mom thought my brother was saving her. I'm the one who gave him 48 hours to get out of her house. By the time they realized I wasn't bluffing, the clock had already been ticking for weeks. It's Christmas Eve. The living room smells like cinnamon and furniture polish, and every light in the house is working overtime, trying to make this place look warmer than it feels. Silas is standing at the edge of the rug in his best sweater, one hand on the back of our mother's chair like he owns both. The guests are packed in: neighbors, church people, the pastor, waiting for him to start his little speech. I'm standing in the doorway with snow still melting in my hair, fingers wrapped around a white folder. Inside, the new power of attorney, the trust, and the report that says my mother is not as safe as everyone in this room thinks she is. Across the room, Rose, my mother, keeps straightening the edge of the tablecloth, like if the fabric lies flat enough, everything else will too. Her apron matches Marcella's, but that's where the similarity ends. Marcella's is spotless. Mom's has a smear of gravy and a burned thumbprint at the edge. Pastor Jim clears his throat, raises his cup. Tonight, he says, we're here to celebrate family. Especially those who give up their own lives to care for their parents. People like Silas and Marcella, who stepped in when no one else did. Heads nod. A few people even clap. Silas ducks his head, does the humble smile he's been practicing. We just did what anyone would, he says. Mom was alone. We couldn't let that happen. And then my mother looks up at me, just for a second, before turning her face toward the crowd. If it weren't for Silas, she says, voice soft but steady, I'd be in a home by now. He saved me. The room murmurs approval. My stomach drops. Because I can see, from where I'm standing, the things they can't. Behind her, against the kitchen wall, there's no chair with her name on it. No place set at the dining table for the woman who paid off this house. Her seat is a metal folding chair pushed to the side, like a spare thought. On the sideboard, next to the punch bowl, there's a guest book with a scripted cover, Visitors for Silas and Marcella's Caregiving Journey. Line after line of praise fills the open pages. Angels. Such a blessing. Rose is lucky to have them. Lucky. Marcella breezes past with a tray of canapes, smile bright enough to blind. She leans down and kisses the top of Mom's head. Don't say we saved you, she laughs for the room. You saved us. You gave us purpose. From a distance, it looks like love. From where I'm standing, it looks like evidence. Because tucked under my arm is the contract Silas made her sign. The one that turns her pension into his paycheck. The one that lets him sell this house if home care becomes too burdensome. The one that, according to the doctor's notes in my bag, sits on top of a medication schedule that keeps her just groggy enough to be compliant. I can feel the edges of the folder biting into my palm. They clap again when Silas finishes talking. Someone starts a carol. The tree lights blink in time with the choir's voices. Outside the window, snow drifts down in slow, quiet sheets, pretending this is some postcard moment. They have no idea this is their last Christmas in this house. I move further into the room, weaving between coats and elbows and paper plates, letting snapshots burn into me as I go. Mom's hands, red at the knuckles from hot water and cold air, folded in her lap. Marcella's nails, glossy and unchipped, resting on Silas's arm like this is a photo shoot. The folding chair against the wall, still empty. In the corner of the kitchen doorway, the laminated schedule is taped to the fridge. I can see it from here. Rose's activity and contribution plan. Tiny checkboxes, red exclamation marks. 6 o'clock, wake, stretch, quiet time in room. 6:30, prepare breakfast for household. 7:30, dishes, counters, kitchen floor. A pill bottle sits on the counter beneath it, half hidden behind a ceramic snowman. I knew, the day I pulled his care contract from the county system, that the law wasn't on their side. I knew, when the blood work came back with sedative levels that made the doctor frown, that the hospital wasn't either. Tonight is for everyone else. Before I tell you what I did in this room, I want you to sit with one thing. Your mother, or your grandmother, or the woman who raised you, standing at a sink in someone else's house, washing dishes she bought, in a kitchen she paid for, while guests praise the person who turned her into staff. Before the ending, what do you think I did first? Did I call a lawyer? Did I call the hospital? Or did I confront him right there in front of everyone? Drop your guess in the comments and timestamp the moment you think you figured it out. I step out of the living room and into the kitchen, past the laughter, past the pastor's story about last year's pageant, past Marcella's voice floating on the air like perfume. The light in here is harsher, whiter. It turns the laminated schedule into a mirror, my own face reflected between the lines of everything they expect my mother to do before she's allowed to sit down. I reach up and tap the plastic with one finger. It doesn't even flutter. On the counter, the pill bottle waits. Label neat, doses anything but. I pick it up, turn it between my fingers, listen to the sound of the tablets clicking against plastic. This isn't where the story started. And it definitely isn't where I decided to end it. The first red flag didn't come in person. It came through my phone. I was standing in my kitchen after a double shift when the family group chat lit up. Silas had sent a photo, Mom on the couch between him and Marcella, all three of them framed by a Christmas tree that wasn't hers. The caption said, "Mom is so happy we moved in. She never wants to be alone again." At a glance, it looked like one of those pictures you print on a mug. Warm. Harmless. Then I zoomed in. Her smile was there, but her eyes weren't. They were wide, shiny, the way they got when she was trying not to show she was tired. And the wall behind them. The wedding photo that had hung there my entire life was gone. So was the graduation collage. In their place, a generic canvas of white flowers on gray, the kind you buy in bulk when you're staging a house. I stared at that empty wall longer than I looked at their faces. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Cute, I almost typed. She looks good. Instead, I hit call. The ring barely hit 3 before someone picked up. "Hey, Amara," I hear myself start to say, then correct it. "Celia. Sorry. Have it." "Yeah. Hey." Marcella's voice poured through the speaker, bright and syrupy. Perfect timing. "I was just about to put your mom down for her nap." Nap. My mother used to joke that naps were dress rehearsals for death. She'd rather fall asleep in a chair with a book than go lie down in the middle of the day like an invalid. "She's napping?" I asked. "Since when?" Marcella laughed, soft and condescending. "Since she turned 67 and her body started reminding her. We keep her on a routine now. It's better for her. Less overstimulation." "Let me talk to her," I said. "She's resting, Celia," Marcella said. "We manage her stimulation very carefully. Too many calls, too many visitors, it wears her out. The pastor, the church ladies, she let that hang there. We have to protect her energy." My jaw clenched. "Put the phone on speaker," I said. "Just for a second." There was a muffled sigh on the other end, a rustle, the echo of footsteps. Then a distant voice, thin but familiar. "Hello." "Mom," I said. "Hey." "It's me." "Oh, sweetheart." Her voice was softer than I remembered. "You sound tired." "So do you," I said. "How are you?" There was a pause long enough for me to picture her eyes flicking sideways, checking who was in the room. "I'm fine," she said. "They're taking such good care of me. I don't know what I'd do without them." In the background, Marcella's tone sharpened. "Okay, that's enough for now. She needs to rest. We'll see you for Christmas, right? Don't stress. We've got everything handled." The line went dead. I stared at my reflection in the blank screen. My own eyes looked a lot like hers had in that photo. In the living room, the TV murmured about holiday sales. On the table, my open laptop glowed with the hospital portal. A half-finished elder abuse training module blinked resume. I clicked it. On the screen, a stock image of an older woman with a forced smile and a younger relative's hand on her shoulder stared back at me. The narrator's voice was calm, almost bored. "Red flags in family caregiving arrangements," it said. "Isolation from visitors. Sudden changes in environment. New helpers controlling access to phones and finances." The bullet points marched down the screen. Caregivers answering all phone calls. Elders suddenly too tired for visitors. Household decor altered without their input. Language about protecting their energy used to justify isolation. I watched the cursor flash at the bottom of the slide and felt something cold settle behind my ribs. At work, I'd sat with daughters who said, I thought my brother was helping, while we circled bruises on their mother's arms with pen caps. I'd help sons fill out forms to revoke power of attorney after a cousin borrowed their dad's pension. I knew the patterns. I just didn't want to see them in my own family. Guilt swelled up, big and familiar. I could hear every visiting hour I'd missed for another overnight shift, every Sunday I'd promised I'd drive down next weekend. I could hear Marcella's voice too. We manage her stimulation. The screen moved to the next slide. Case example. Son misuses power of attorney. The fake names blurred into my mother's handwriting in my memory, the way she'd signed my permission slips, the mortgage, the last check to the bank. By the time the module ended, the cereal in my bowl had turned to paste. My phone buzzed again with another photo, Mom in a Christmas sweater this time, sitting at the table while Silas carved a turkey like a magazine ad. I didn't open it. Instead, I opened my calendar and counted backward from Christmas Eve. 2 weeks. I booked the day off. The first visit, I didn't tell them I was coming. The drive to my childhood town was muscle memory. The highway curved the same way, the billboards changed, but my hands took the exits without thinking. By the time the GPS voice told me to turn onto our street, my heart was hammering. From the curb, the house looked good. The lawn was trimmed. The porch light glowed steady. A new wreath hung on the door, all polished berries and perfect ribbon. I knocked. The door opened on the second try. Cinnamon hit me first. Then the layered smell of perfume, roast meat, and that powdery clean scent from scented candles. Celia. Marcella stood there in a red dress, hair perfectly curled, surprised for exactly half a second before she drew me into a hug that smelled like vanilla and control. You should have told us you were coming. Mom gets thrown off when her routine changes. I wanted to surprise her, I said. She hesitated, just a fraction too long. Of course you did, she said. Come in. We're actually hosting a little thing for the church today. They wanted to celebrate us for, she lowered her voice. Everything we've been doing. She stepped aside. The living room was full. Church members perched on chairs and ottomans, balancing paper plates. Pastor Jim sat in Dad's old armchair, hands wrapped around a mug. On the coffee table lay a spiral-bound guestbook with a pen resting across it. Visitors for Silas and Marcella's caregiving journey, the cover read in looping script. And there, in the kitchen doorway, wearing an apron that matched Marcella's, but hung looser over her frame, was my mother. Mom, I said. Her face lit up in the way it always had when I walked in unannounced, but the spark burned out quicker this time, replaced by something cautious. Celia, she said. She wiped her hands on the apron without looking down, as if the motion had become automatic. You didn't tell me you were coming. I didn't know I needed to book a slot, I said lightly. She flinched just enough for me to see it. Don't mind her, Marcella cut in. She gets overwhelmed when we change her day. Come, there's food, Mom made everything. She beamed at the room. She insists. Mom tried to laugh. It came out thin. Silas appeared from somewhere behind the couch, sliding into the space between us with a practiced ease. He clapped a hand on my shoulder. Look who finally made time for the old house, he said. I took in the details. The rocking chair that used to sit in the corner by the window was gone. The framed wedding photo that had hung above the TV had been replaced by a generic landscape. The rug was new. So was the TV. On the wall, where Mom had kept a calendar with our childhood scribbles, there was now a glossy framed quote about gratitude. Come see what we've done with the place, Silas said, sweeping his arm wide. It's safer now. Fewer tripping hazards. Doctor's orders. He said it like a joke. The room laughed. In the kitchen, the light was brighter. The counters gleamed. Pots simmered on the stove. On the fridge, under 2 novelty magnets shaped like hearts, a laminated sheet caught my eye. Rose's activity and contribution plan. 6 o'clock, wake, stretch, quiet time in room. 6:30, prepare breakfast for household. 7:30, dishes, counters, kitchen floor. 8:30, laundry. 9:30, rest. 10 o'clock, light dusting. Tiny checkboxes lined each row. Some were ticked off. Others had red exclamation marks next to them. At the bottom, in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. No visitors after 8 p.m. Do not argue about medication. I didn't touch it. I just stood there, letting the letters burn themselves onto the inside of my skull. Isn't it helpful? Marcella said, breezing in with a tray. She kept losing track of her day, so we made a routine. She loves it. Right, Mom? Mom's eyes flicked to mine, then back to the floor. It keeps me busy, she said. On the counter near the stove sat a plastic pill organizer. The days of the week marched across the top in faded letters. Some compartments were empty, others full. A brown prescription bottle stood beside it, the label turned just enough that I could read the generic name for a sedative. I knew the doses I'd seen in her chart last year. I knew these weren't them. Doctor changed her meds, Silas said, following my gaze. She was too anxious. We keep it all locked in now so she doesn't get confused. That's not how anxiety meds work, I said. He shrugged. We're doing our best. My best is 12-hour shifts and meals eaten from vending machines. His best is siphoning 70% of her pension into his account under the label caregiver compensation. I didn't say that out loud. Not yet. Instead, I stayed through one carol, then another, watching as people lined up to hug my mother and thank Silas and Marcella for sacrificing so much. When I couldn't stand it anymore, I stepped out onto the porch and let the cold air bite my lungs. By the time I got back to my apartment that night, my coat still smelled like their candles. I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and typed my mother's full name into the county clerk's online portal. Old deeds popped up. The original mortgage. The satisfaction piece. Tax assessments. Then, 6 months ago, a power of attorney. Silas North listed as attorney in fact. I clicked. The scanned document bloomed on the screen in black and white. Mom's signature trembled at the bottom. Silas's was bold, confident. Marcella's curled across the witness line. Attached was another document, handwritten, scanned crooked. Care agreement. Rose will receive full-time care from Silas and Marcella North, it said. In exchange, they will receive monthly caregiver compensation equal to 70% of her pension and any additional board or utility cost deemed necessary. A clause near the end snagged my eye. If home care becomes too burdensome, Silas may place Rose in any facility he deems appropriate and may liquidate assets, including the residence at address, to cover costs. My vision blurred. When I blinked it clear, the clause was still there. I'd read this script before. Just with different names. Mr. Carmichael. Mrs. Gwynn. Names on charts that came with fall injuries and unexplained bruises. Now it was my mother's name at the top of the page. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The portal asked if I wanted to download a copy. I clicked yes. On the coffee table, my phone buzzed. A new message lit the screen, another picture, another caption about how Mom made her famous roast again. I ignored it. This channel exists, I said quietly, more to myself than anyone, for the people who did everything right and still had to fight just to keep what they already paid for. If that feels familiar to you, listening to this, you're in the right place. The next day, I called her doctor. 3 days later, I drove her to the hospital. We'll just get your numbers checked, I said, steering her wheelchair into the bright corridor. Holiday tune-up. You always told me to service the car before winter. Same logic. She tried to joke. You always did hate the mechanic, she said. Now you're dragging me into one. But her hands shook on the armrests. The nurse drew blood, wrapped the band, patted her arm. The doctor, a woman with kind eyes and a spine of steel, asked her quiet questions about sleep, appetite, dizziness. Then she asked the one that made my mother's eyes dart sideways. Do you feel safe at home, Rose? Mom's lips parted. Closed. She glanced at me, then at the door, as if Silas might walk through it any second. They said I was safer there, she said finally. They said I'd fall if I stayed alone. The doctor nodded. Who said that? Silas. Marcella. Her fingers knotted in her lap. They said if I didn't sign, they'd have no choice. That the state would put me somewhere with strangers. That they were saving me from that. She swallowed. I didn't want to be a burden, she whispered. After everything. After the house. After your father. Her eyes shone. They said they were saving me. I believed them. The doctor and I caught each other's eyes over her head. Later, in a small consult room, the doctor slid a printout across the table. Her blood work shows elevated sedatives, she said quietly. Given her prescriptions, this pattern suggests she's getting more than she should. Or at the wrong times. She's not filling her own pillbox, I said. No, the doctor agreed. She isn't. She folded her hands. Celia, she said. If we file this report with Adult Protective Services, there's no going back to the way things were. Relationships change. Families fracture. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my brother's face, the guest book, the laminated schedule, the way Mom's hand had hovered over the folding chair like it was home now. I thought about the clause that let him sell her house and send her wherever he deemed appropriate. Good, I said. I'm not going back. Adult Protective Services doesn't feel like a form. It feels like betrayal in triplicate. The caseworker slid the packet across the table, the way I'd seen 100 times from the other side. Name, date of birth, address, relationship to alleged victim. Alleged victim. I filled in my mother's name, each letter dragging. Describe the concerns, the caseworker said gently. As specific as you can. I wrote. Bruises on forearms, unexplained. Noticeable weight loss. Sedatives given at wrong times. Power of attorney used to control finances and threaten institutionalization. I hesitated over the last line, then added. Caregivers. Silas North, son, Marcella North, daughter-in-law. My hand left a small smear of ink at the edge of his name. The caseworker read in silence, lips moving slightly as she traced each sentence. When she reached the end, she folded her hands. You work in a hospital, don't you? She asked. Social work, I said. Elder care. She nodded once. So you know the process. I know it when it's someone else's brother, I said. Something in her face softened. She turned to her computer, tapped a few keys, eyes scanning the screen. Wait, she murmured more to herself than to me. We've seen this name. My spine straightened. What do you mean? She turned the monitor slightly away, but not before I caught the hint of another file, another complaint. There was a call last year, she said carefully. A neighbor worried about how loudly he was talking to your mother. It didn't go anywhere. We couldn't substantiate. But still. It sat there between us like a weight. She printed one more page, slid it toward me. Sign here to confirm your statement is true to the best of your knowledge, she said. And here, acknowledging that we may contact law enforcement or other agencies if needed. My pen hovered. It's my brother, I said. As if she hadn't noticed the shared last name. She didn't flinch. It's your mother, she said quietly. That comes first. I signed. Later that week, I sat in a different office with different documents. The elder law attorney's conference room smelled like coffee and paper. Certificates lined the wall behind her desk. Her nameplate read green, small, and polished. She listened without interrupting as I laid it all out, the care contract, the sedatives, the schedule, the guest book. When I was done, she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. Your mother is still capable of making her own decisions, she said. That's important. It means she can revoke the power of attorney she gave your brother and appoint someone else. It also means we can protect the house. How? I asked. We create a new power of attorney naming you, she said. Then we place the house into a living trust with your mother and you as co-trustees. Your brother cannot sell what he does not own or control. It sounded clean on paper. In my head, I saw Silas's face when he realized the keys he'd been dangling were gone. What happens when he finds out? I asked. She didn't sugarcoat it. He may accuse you of manipulation, she said. Of stealing your mother. He may try to challenge the documents. It could get noisy. My mother sat beside me, hands folded, listening. I worked 30 years for that house, she said, voice low but steady. I can sign one more time to protect it. Green smiled, just a little. That's the spirit I like, she said. But we'll do this properly. No shortcuts. No corners cut. So when he yells, all he's yelling at is the law. We scheduled the signing for the next morning at a small notary office across from the courthouse. The notary's desk was old wood, scarred, solid. The opposite of the flimsy kitchen table where Silas had spread out his care contract 20 minutes before dinner one night and told our mother she was saving him from bankruptcy. Standard forms, he'd said then. Just to make things easier. He'd slid pages in front of her without witnesses, without stamps, without anyone to tell her she could say no. Now, the notary slid new pages toward her with slow, careful movements. "Rose, do you understand what you're signing today?" she asked. Mom met her eyes. "I'm giving my daughter the power I shouldn't have given my son," she said. "And I'm putting my house where he can't touch it." Green's lips twitched. "That's one way to put it," she said. Mom's hand shook, but less than it had on the scanned copy I'd seen online. The pen scratched across the paper, leaving her name in fresh ink under words that had been reviewed, explained, witnessed. The notary stamped each page, the heavy thunk of the seal echoing in the small room. "There," she said. "Now it's real." We walked out into the winter air with a folder full of documents that felt heavier than they looked. At the recorder's office, the clerk took them with the same bored efficiency he gave every filing. "Trust," he muttered, entering the information. "Power of attorney." "Got it." He slipped them into the system, where they joined decades of other records. Deeds. Liens. A lifetime of paper trails. When we left, my mother paused on the courthouse steps. "You used to bring me here when you were little," she said. "Remember? For civics projects. You'd watch the people going in and out and make up stories." "I remember," I said. "I never thought," she said slowly, "that one of those stories would be ours. 2 weeks until Christmas Eve." That's what I told myself as I drove her home. 14 days until Pastor Jim would stand in our living room and call Silas a hero. 14 days until my mother would call him her savior. 14 days until I'd lay a different set of papers on the table and tell him he had 48 hours to leave. The clock started then. He didn't hear it, but I did. In those 2 weeks, life pretended to go on. Silas posted photos online, him pushing Mom's wheelchair down the church aisle, captioned, "Wouldn't trade this for anything." Marcella uploaded a video of herself stirring a pot on our stove, Mom blurred in the background, with text overlaid, "Caregiving isn't easy, but it's worth it." Comments poured in. "Bless you both. Your sister doesn't know what she's missing. Hope my kids love me like this someday." Marcella sent one of those videos to the family chat, just in case I'd missed it. "They're saying we should start a channel," she wrote. "Our story inspires people." I muted the conversation. In the hospital, I sat with patients whose families didn't show up. I sat with families who refused to leave, who camped in chairs for days. I filled out forms, updated charts, reminded myself why I was doing this. On my breaks, I checked my email for updates. One afternoon, a message from Adult Protective Services landed in my inbox. Subject line, "North Rose, case acknowledgement." They thanked me for my report in careful, neutral language. They noted the risk factors, the evidence, the plan to observe the situation and coordinate with other agencies as necessary. At the bottom, a single line. "Please be aware we may visit the residence unannounced." I sat back in my chair, letting that sink in. I didn't need them to knock on the door on Christmas Eve. I didn't need them to stand behind me while I unfolded documents in front of my brother. I just needed them to know what they'd be walking into if they ever did. When someone uses the law to hurt the person who raised you, what do you call it? Desperate? Greedy? Criminal? Before you see what I did on Christmas Eve, tell me in the comments which one you'd pick for Silas. Because by the time the choir started that night, every system he thought he had on his side, the courts, the doctors, the neighbors, had already heard a different version of the story. He just didn't know yet that the law he'd been hiding behind was about to step out of his shadow and stand next to me. The APS envelope sits at the bottom of my bag, its corner digging into my hip every time I move. The white folder is on the coffee table, neat and unassuming, like it's holding recipes instead of the end of a scam. Connie is near the doorway, arms folded, lips pressed into a line I've only ever seen when the neighborhood kids cut through her rose bushes. She catches my eye, gives the smallest nod. She knows why she's here. We're back where we started. Christmas lights blink along the mantel. The tree glows in the corner. Pastor Jim is in Dad's old armchair, holding court with a story about last year's pageant, the one where Joseph fainted during Silent Night. Silas stands near the center of the room, one hand resting on the back of Mom's chair. Marcella hovers just behind him, perfectly placed so every praise lands on both of them. Pastor Jim raises his voice above the murmur. Now before we sing, he says, I just want to take a moment to honor something special. He gestures towards Silas and Marcella. What these two have done, moving in, caring for Rose, giving up their own lives to make sure she's never alone, that's what family looks like. Applause breaks out. Someone whistles. Marcella brings a hand to her chest, eyes shining on cue. Silas looks down, fake modest. We don't need recognition, he says, though he clearly does. We just did what anyone would do. Mom lifts her head. They saved me, she says. The room quiets. They saved me from being alone, she continues, voice trembling. They saved this house. I don't know where I'd be if they hadn't stepped in. Her hand finds Silas's wrist, fingers curling around it. The words land like tiny cuts. Saved. 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 I hear none of the story the way they want me to. I hear sedatives poured into pill organizers at the wrong time. I hear contracts signed in fear. I hear the line any facility he deems appropriate every time someone says, house. My heart is pounding so hard I can feel it in my gums. Pastor Jim nods satisfied. You raised good children, Rose, he says. I step forward. Can I say something? I ask. Silas's smile falters. Marcella's hand tightens on his arm. All eyes turn. I walk to the space between the couch and the coffee table, where the tree lights throw little circles of color on the floor. The white folder is within arm's reach. The APS envelope burns against my side. If we're going to talk about who saved who, I say, we need to start with the paperwork. A laugh bubbles from somewhere, then dies when they see my face. Celia, Silas says, warning in his tone. This isn't the time. It's exactly the time, I say. I pick up the folder and open it. Here's what you haven't heard yet, I tell the room. While you've been signing that guest book and calling my brother a hero. I hold up the first page. Mom's blood work shows sedatives at levels that don't match what she was prescribed, I say. She was getting pills at the wrong times. Enough to make her compliant. Enough to make her tired, confused. Enough to make it easier to tell her she didn't understand what she was signing. Marcella huffs, rolls her eyes. You're not a doctor, she says. You're overreacting to charts. The doctor who signed this report isn't overreacting, I say, tapping the letterhead. Neither is Adult Protective Services. The room shifts. Someone whispers. Pastor Jim's brows pull together. I lay the hospital report on the coffee table so the heading is visible. Next, I pull out the downloaded care agreement. This, I say, is the contract Silas had Mom sign. Silas steps forward, hand outstretched. You don't understand. I move it out of his reach. It says, I read, that in exchange for care, Silas and Marcella get 70% of her pension every month, plus whatever else they decide is necessary. It also says that if taking care of her becomes too burdensome, he can place her in any facility he chooses and sell this house to pay for it. A murmur ripples through the room. Someone says, that can't be right. Silas seizes the opening. That's standard, he says quickly. Everyone does that now. We had to. The bank insisted. The lawyer said. There was no lawyer, I cut in. There was a kitchen table, no witnesses, and no notary stamp. You downloaded a template, Silas. You printed it on the same paper you use for your resumes. Marcella crosses her arms. You left, she says. You moved to the city and left your mother alone. We stepped in. Now you're mad because we organized things. Connie's voice slices through before I can answer. Organize things, she repeats. Is that what you call it when someone closes the door in your face every time you come to visit? All heads swivel toward the doorway. Connie steps fully into the room now, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. I knocked for months, she says. Every Sunday. I heard Rose's voice from inside, and every time, one of you said she was too tired or resting. You told me not to come without calling first. You told me it upset her. But the last time, I heard her crying. And I heard you telling her she was ungrateful. Marcella opens her mouth. Connie holds up a hand. And when I asked to see her myself, Connie says, "You said she was too confused to know who she wanted to see." Silas shifts his weight, shoulders tensing. "This is between us," he says. "Neighbors don't understand what it takes to care for someone every day. This is between all of us now," I say quietly. "Because you built your story in public. You invited a pastor, a guestbook, a whole congregation to watch you play saint while you used our mother as a live-in maid and a paycheck." Mom's chair scrapes softly. She pushes herself up, fingers gripping the armrests. "Sit," Marcella hisses under her breath. "You'll tire yourself." Mom stays standing. Her hands tremble, but her voice, when it comes, reaches every corner of the room. "They told me," she says, eyes fixed on Pastor Jim for a moment before sliding to Silas, "that if I didn't sign, I'd be sent away. That the state would put me in a place with strangers. That I'd be a burden. They said they were saving me." She swallows. "I worked every day after Gerald died," she says. "I graded papers until my eyes hurt, paid off this house penny by penny. I thought, if my son wants to help, who am I to say no?" She laughs, a small, broken sound. "Turns out I should have said no." Silas's face crumples. "Mom, that's not fair," he says. "You know how hard we've worked. We moved in. We gave up everything. Celia doesn't see that because she was never here." I take a step closer. "You gave up rent," I say. "You gained free meals, no utilities, and a direct line into her bank account." I reach back into the folder and pull out the last documents. "Here's what changes tonight." I lay the new power of attorney on the table. "Mom met with an elder law attorney," I say. "She revoked the authority you took and gave it to me. This is witnessed, notarized, filed. You don't speak for her anymore. Not to banks. Not to doctors. Not to anyone." I place the trust papers beside it. "And this," I continue, "is the trust that now holds this house. Your name is nowhere on it. You can't mortgage it. You can't sell it. You can't use it as collateral for your next business venture." Silas stares at the pages as if they might rearrange themselves. "You can't do that," he says. "You can't just come in here twice a year and—" "I didn't do it twice a year," I say. "I did it in waiting rooms and over lunch breaks and in offices you've never walked into. I did it while you were posting videos about how hard caregiving is." I look him dead in the eye. "You don't control her finances anymore," I say. "You don't control this house anymore." A silence falls that feels heavier than any hymn. Marcella recovers first. "So that's it," she says. "You get to be the hero now? You sweep in, steal the power we built, and everyone claps for you? This isn't justice, it's jealousy." "Jealousy of what?" I ask. "Of a schedule that tells my mother when she's allowed to sit down? Of a contract that calls her life burdensome on page 3. I take a breath. "You want to talk about heroes?" I say. "Heroes don't need their mother's pension to pay their bills. Heroes don't threaten to lock her up if she doesn't sign whatever they slide in front of her." I turn slightly, addressing the room as much as them. "She thought my brother was saving her," I say. "He was using her. For money. For free labor. For a story that made him look good." I look back at Silas. That story ends tonight. His jaw clenches. Color drains from his face. "What are you going to do?" he asks. "Throw me out? In front of everyone?" "Yes," I say. The word hangs there, simple and solid. "You have 48 hours to move out," I tell him. 48 hours to pack your things, find somewhere else to live, and stop treating this house like a prize you won. After that, any attempt to touch her accounts, her mail, or her medical decisions becomes part of an active investigation. I tap the APS envelope in my bag. "They already know your name," I add. "If you want to add more pages to that file, keep pushing." The guests shift. One woman quietly picks up her purse. A man near the tree sets his plate down, eyes on the floor. Pastor Jim looks like someone yanked the script out of his hands midline. Connie exhales, a sound halfway between relief and grief. Silas looks around the room, searching for an ally. "You're all just going to stand there," he demands. "You're going to let her do this? You've seen what we do for her. You've seen the videos, the posts, We've seen what you wanted us to see," Connie says. "Now we've seen this." Marcella grabs his arm. "We don't have to listen to this," she says. "We can fight it. We can get a lawyer. We can. Get a lawyer, I say. He'll tell you the same thing mine told me. Mom has the right to change her mind. And she just did. Mom sinks back into her chair, the effort of standing written in the lines of her face. But her eyes are clear. Silas's mouth opens and closes, no sound coming out. I see it then, the cycle behind his eyes. Denial. This can't be happening. Anger. How dare you? Fear. What if it does? He grabs his keys from the side table with more force than he needs to. The metal clacks against the wood. This isn't over, he says. He storms past me, shoulder knocking mine. The front door slams, rattling the wreath. The room exhales as if it's been holding its breath for 6 months. I don't follow him. I don't know yet whether he'll obey or fight, whether he'll pack boxes quietly or try one more manipulation before the 48 hours run out. I just know one thing. For the first time in a long time, my mother's house belongs to her story again, not his. Silas didn't leave in a storm. He left in cardboard. The next morning, the house smelled like coffee and cold air. Boxes sat open in the hallway, half filled with clothes, tools, random pieces of a life that had threaded itself through this house like ivy and now had to be peeled off. Marcella's voice carried down the corridor, sharp and fraying. "This is your fault," she said, shoving a stack of folded shirts into a box. "You should have told me about the lawyer. You should have told me about that letter. We could have done something." Silas snapped the tape across the top of another box harder than he needed to. "Oh, so now it's my fault?" he shot back. "You were the one who said we needed the contract. You were the one who said everyone does this. You were the one who told me she'd never sign anything for Celia if we got to her first." "And you believed her," Marcella said. "Because you always believe your mother. Look where that got us." Their argument rose and fell like bad weather. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen, watching, the mug warm in my hands, the ceramic edge digging into my palm every time one of them threw a blame that almost stuck. Mom sat at the table, wrapped in a cardigan, eyes following them. At one point, Marcella caught my gaze. "Hope you're happy," she said. "You broke your own family." "You just can't say thank you," Silas added. "You never could. We did everything, and you walked in and tore it down." I didn't answer. Not then. Marcella grabbed her handbag, slung it over her shoulder. "You've got 4 boxes left," she told Silas. "I'm not doing them." She brushed past me, perfume trailing in her wake, and slammed the front door behind her. The house shook, then settled. Silas stayed where he was, one hand on the cardboard, shoulders hunched. He took a breath, then another, then turned toward the kitchen. "Mom," he said, hovering at the threshold. "Can we talk?" She nodded once. He walked in slowly, as if the room might bite. Up close, he looked older than he had last night. The performance was gone. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw rough with stubble. "I didn't mean for it to get like this," he said. "I swear. It was supposed to be temporary. Just until we got ahead. Marcella lost her job, I had the contractor stuff fall through, and then the bills, the car." His voice trailed off. He swallowed. "We read things," he said. "Online. Articles about caregiver compensation. Stories about kids getting nothing after doing everything. We thought," he laughed once, without humor, "we thought we were being smart." Mom watched him, hands folded on the table. "I am not a bill to be split," she said quietly. He flinched. "I know," he said. "Now. I didn't see it. I saw the numbers. I saw the relief." His gaze flicked to the laminated schedule still on the fridge. "I liked feeling needed." "You were needed," she said. "Before you moved in. Before you wrote contracts. Before you turned my house into a project." He blinked hard. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to earn a place in your own home. I'm sorry I let Marcella talk about you like you were in the way." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry I chose easy over honest for this long." Tears slipped down his face. He wiped them away impatiently with the heel of his hand. "I believe you're sorry," Mom said. He looked up, hopeful, childlike for a second. "But," he asked. She took a breath. "But I also believe you chose yourself every day," she said. "You chose free rent over my peace. You chose silence when I was afraid. You chose to spend my pension before you asked how I wanted to spend my time." She shook her head. I can forgive many things, she said. But I cannot trust you in this house anymore. The words landed like a door closing. His shoulders sagged. He nodded, once, small and resigned. Do you want me to call? He asked. On holidays. Birthdays. You can call, she said. Whether I answer will depend on how you sound. He winced, but he didn't argue. He turned to go, then paused at the doorway, looking at me for the first time that morning. You got what you wanted, he said. I met his gaze. I got what she needed, I said. He shook his head like he couldn't tell the difference, then walked down the hall, lifted the last box, and carried it out to the car. The door closed behind him with a softer click this time. I watched from the front window as he loaded the trunk, hands moving slower now, like every shirt and book weighed more than it should. He sat in the driver's seat for a full minute before starting the engine. When he finally pulled away, the taillights disappeared at the end of the street we'd biked down as kids. It felt less like an ending and more like someone had finally named what had already been broken for years. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been in a long time. Not the tight, held breath quiet of walking on eggshells. A different quiet. Thicker. Truer. I turned back toward the kitchen. The first thing I did was walk to the fridge. The laminated schedule stared back at me, still anchored by heart-shaped magnets. 6 o'clock, wake. 6:30, breakfast. 7:30, floors. I peeled it off. The plastic pulled free with a reluctant hiss. The magnets snapped together over the empty patch of white. I folded the schedule once, twice, then slid it into an envelope with the care contract and the APS letter. A record, not a rule. In its place, I pinned up a photo. Mom and Dad on their 30th anniversary, dancing in this same kitchen, the table pushed against the wall, her head thrown back in laughter, his hand steady on her waist. The fridge hummed, indifferent, but the room felt different already. Next, the bedroom. The master bedroom door had been closed for months. When I pushed it open, the air inside smelled faintly of aftershave and dust. Silas and Marcella had made it theirs. Bland bedding. Neutral art. No trace of the woman who'd painted the walls herself one summer and insisted on keeping Dad's fishing hat on the bedpost because it keeps him in the room. We changed that. We carried Mom's clothes back in armfuls, her dresses and sweaters soft with wear. We rehung the wedding photo above the dresser. We brought the rocking chair up from the garage, wiping a thin film of dust from its arms. The fishing hat came last. I found it in a box in the closet of the small back bedroom they'd pushed her into. The brim was bent. The sweatband smelled faintly of lake water even after all these years. I hooked it back on the bedpost where it had hung for decades. Mom stood in the doorway, hand on the frame, watching. You don't have to do all this, she said. I got used to the other room. You shouldn't have had to, I said. She took a tentative step inside, then another. The mattress dipped the way her body remembered. She sat on the edge of the bed and ran her hand over the quilt. I thought it would hurt, she said. Coming back in here. Does it? I asked. She considered. It hurts differently, she said. Not like a bruise. More like a muscle waking up. Later, in the afternoon, I did something that felt small and huge at the same time. I stood at the kitchen sink and washed the dishes. Mom sat at the table with a mug of coffee, watching me. The light from the window fell across her face, highlighting the soft lines at the corners of her mouth. You're doing that wrong, she said finally, a smile tugging at her lips. You're supposed to soak the pans first. You can correct me from your chair, I said. That's the point. She laughed, really laughed, and it didn't sound like something she apologized for halfway through. Connie came over on Sunday with an apple pie, container still warm in her hands. This time, the door opened before she had to knock twice. There she is, Mom said, stepping aside. I thought you'd given up on me. On you. Connie snorted. Never. On them. She jerked her chin toward the empty driveway. Maybe. They sat at the table with plates and coffee, pie crumbs scattering like confetti. The laughter in the room had a different texture now. It didn't feel like a show guests were supposed to clap for. It felt like something they'd forgotten and were learning again. If you watched this far, you didn't stay for drama. You stayed because some part of this already knew your story. Maybe you've been the quiet one holding everything together, telling yourself that absorbing it all without complaining is what strength looks like. Save this video. Come back to it on the day you decide to stop. Because the hardest part isn't calling a lawyer or filling out a report. It's deciding that your peace, and the peace of the person who raised you, is worth more than keeping the family story tidy. In the days that followed, life didn't turn into a montage of joy. There were awkward calls. Messages from relatives who only saw Silas's posts and wanted to know why I was attacking him. There were nights when Mom stared at the ceiling and wondered out loud if she'd pushed him too hard as a child or not enough. We walked through all of it. We set new boundaries. No more signing things she didn't understand. No more scheduling her day around someone else's convenience. No more apologizing for needing help without strings. One late afternoon, when the air was cold enough to sting and the sky was the color of pewter, she put on her coat and went out to the garden. The beds were a mess, dead stems, leaves matted against the soil. Months of neglect had turned neat rows into a tangle. She stood at the edge for a long time, hands in her pockets, breath a faint cloud. "You don't have to," I called from the back door. "We can hire someone in the spring." She glanced back at me, eyes bright. "I'm not doing this for the yard," she said. "I'm doing it for me." She crouched down slowly, knees protesting, and pressed her fingers into the earth. It was cold on top, but underneath it gave. "See," she said. "Not dead. Just waiting." She started to clear, bit by bit. Pulling up dead stalks. Cutting back what could regrow. Leaving what needed to sleep. I joined her, gloved hands working alongside hers. The world narrowed to the sound of roots tearing free, the smell of soil, the rhythm of two people tending something that had been left too long. "Love is not a contract you sign in fear," I said quietly, more to myself than to her. "It's the place you can go and still be loved after you say no." She looked up, dirt smudged on her cheek, eyes clear. "That," she said, "is a definition I can live with." We finished as the light faded, fingers numb, back stiff, hearts a little lighter. We walked back inside together. The house was quiet, but not empty. My mom thought my brother was saving her. In the end, she saved herself the day she believed me.